We start our passenger train cavalcade on the Pennsylvania Railroad's famous Horseshoe Curve. Coming up the grade is the westbound Duquesne. Notice the hillsides with the barren appearance of the foliage. This was due to the heavy fallout of cinders from the thousands of steam trains that worked through here. East of Huntington, train number 32, the St. Louis, sweeps through. This consist also includes the cars of the Pennsylvania Limited, which were added at Pittsburgh. Near Johnstown is the westbound Juniata, train 211-33. The Detroit Express, train 105, is scorching the ties through Allen Park, Michigan, as it hurries to Detroit's 4th Street Union Depot. It had to hurry because the Red Arrow was normally 20 minutes behind, and it had to get out of its way. Arriving at Chicago's Union Station is train number 71, the Admiral. West of Gary, Indiana, and adjacent to the Elgin, Joliet, and Eastern storage yards, we see the eastbound Broadway Limited, train 28, as it slows for a speed restriction in the area. Strange, but there was no exotic tail car on the Broadway this day. The greatest railroad structure at Pocahontas, Illinois, was the frame building barely large enough to store a motor car, but it did provide a landmark to watch the passage of train number 31, the Spirit of St. Louis. These are the electrified corridor tracks between Washington and Baltimore, where a southbound Tuscan Red GG1 is leading train number 171, the Colonial. The Chesapeake and Ohio cars are for the fast-flying Virginian to be picked up at Washington, D.C., and the New Haven cars will return to Boston the following day. This northbound train is number 104, the Atlantic Coast Line's East Coast Champion. This is a Miami to New York train. A Silverliner commuter coach is departing Glen Olden on the northbound track. As it leaves, we see train number 149, the Afternoon Keystone, rolling by on the opposite track. Three elderly ladies wait patiently on the Lima, Ohio station platform for train number 32, the Manhattan Limited. During the war years, these same ladies served donuts and coffee to thousands of military personnel, many of whom wrote letters of thanks for their kindness. They were still serving free coffee and donuts to military personnel in 1967. Living in or near Chicago in the mid-50s provided almost no limit to the extensive views of the railroads. There were exotic first-generation diesels, sparkling consists of the new streamlined passenger trains, well-maintained track work, and almost constant train activity to be photographed and enjoyed. The views from the few downtown skyscrapers gave an appearance of myriads of track running off in many directions. And looking down on the yards proved that there was engineering imagination to weave those various tracks through and across each other. The Chicago skyline of yesterday has dramatically changed, and so has the passenger train activity. Some of the passenger stations of the 50s no longer exist, and the only time steam comes to town is for a special excursion. Passenger train maintenance and outward cleaning was of prime consideration for most railroads in the 50s. Advertising of the era promoted passenger rail travel as the ultimate in speed and comfort. The equipment was designed and maintained to reflect that image. Just viewing the passenger switching activity could start one's imagination flowing to thoughts of traveling by rail to faraway places. These are Santa Fe locomotives being readied for trips to the vast American West. Santa Fe's train number 23, the Grand Canyon, is now leaving Dearborn Station on its way to Los Angeles. It is crossing the 21st Street Junction. It is 1954, and Grand Trunk Western steam engine number 6330 brings in the International Limited as it arrives from Montreal and Toronto. Several years later, in 1968 to be exact, the International arrives again at Dearborn Station, only this time behind diesels manufactured by General Motors Electromotive Division, or EMD. The train was handed over to the Grand Trunk at Port Huron, Michigan, from the Canadian National Railway. On occasion, CN units are used throughout the trip from Toronto. Another Grand Trunk passenger train, the Maple Leaf, is heading east out of Griffith, Indiana. The Chicago, Indianapolis, and Louisville Railroad, better known as the Monon, had only two passenger trains in 1964. Numbered 5 and 6, both were named the Thoroughbred. They ran the full length through Indiana from Chicago to Louisville. Here is northbound train number 6 crossing the Elgin, Joliet, and Eastern Diamond at Dyer, Indiana. Early in 1967, the Chicago and Eastern Illinois was merged into the Missouri Pacific Railroad Company. Here, 2 years later, we see northbound train number 4, the Chicago-Danville Flyer near Chicago Heights. A few months later, we catch another look at the Flyer, this time near Thornton, Illinois. We are back in Chicago as the Chicago and Eastern Illinois Florida Streamliner, the Dixie Flagler, is backed into Dearborn Station for loading. The locomotive is a Chicago and Western Indiana RS-1, manufactured by Alco. On the adjacent track, a string of Grand Trunk Western cars behind another C&WI switcher comes out of Dearborn Station. The Illinois Central Railroad had an impressive lineup of well-known passenger train names, their popularity no doubt enhanced by popular songs. Departing Kankakee, Illinois, behind a glistening E9A locomotive is train number 1, the City of New Orleans. Now the Streamliner, the City of Miami, arrives at Kankakee. It is train number 53, and it will stop for passengers. The lead locomotive is an EMD E8A. Just before Amtrak took over most passenger train travel in the United States in 1971, the City of Miami is found traveling through Kensington Junction on its return trip to Chicago. Without a doubt, the sharpest passenger trains in Chicago belong to the Illinois Central. The Illini, train number 7, is southbound through Kensington. As it passes, we see a Chicago and Eastern Illinois freight cross on its tracks overhead. Back at Kankakee on a Sunday morning in 1964, the Green Diamond slows for a stop. This is Illinois Central's train number 21, and it provided service between Chicago and St. Louis. Richton Park is the end of the electric line and a location for storage tracks for commuter equipment. This time, the Green Diamond is coming by at speed. The New York Central was also a dominant player in its day. It is a summer day in 1952 in Dearborn, Michigan, and this is the Chicago Mercury. Steam-powered trains on the New York Central were still in vogue on this day. All too soon thereafter, however, the diesels had taken over as we see the Chicago Mercury again in Dearborn with internal combustion power. Diesel power seemed to catch on like a tidal wave and became the standard for all passenger trains. A pair of EMD E7s with train number 31, the Twilight Limited, is westbound out of Dearborn. A popular place for train watching has always been Telegraph Curve near Dearborn. The westbound Twilight Limited is making good time on this spring day in 1955. Perhaps indicative of its name, the Twilight Limited provides a dramatic scene as it passes Livernois Yard near Detroit. A final view of the Twilight Limited is captured as it comes up the grade of Telegraph Curve. Steam could occasionally be found in 1953, but it was a stroke of luck to be where one could catch it on camera. The next year, the Michigan is seen passing the Peninsular Paper Mill at Ypsilanti, Michigan, with the latest in diesel power. A nice pan of the Michigan really shows off its speed as it makes its daily run near Detroit. On the same run, the Michigan is passing Fletcher's Pond. As the Michigan comes through Town Line near Dearborn, Michigan, a freight holds on the eastbound track, waiting for the signal to proceed. The Wolverine is racing through the countryside between Wayne and Ypsilanti. Christmas traffic has nicely stretched this westbound Wolverine to 15 cars. The feathers of steam coming from the cars serve as indicators to the engine crew that the cars are receiving steam heat. We have a pleasant surprise as we turn and see train number 368, the Motor City Special, with a running meet as the trains pass Town Line Cabin. The Wolverine is now making its appearance at Telegraph Curve as it leaves Dearborn. This is Michigan Central Terminal in Detroit. The Wolverine is making its 7:30 a.m. departure for Chicago. As it leaves, we catch a glimpse of a Chesapeake and Ohio freight, which will run through Canada on its own line to Buffalo, New York.